February 25th, 2021, our Human Resources Committee meeting. So I think before we get started, it's appropriate that we get a statement from our legal counsel regarding the governor's executive order, and I think it's probably probably a roll call is in order as well. Will.
Okay, so I will begin with a roll call. Commissioner Ansari?
Yes.
Commissioner Thaden?
Here.
Commissioner Bowers?
Here.
Commissioner Batts?
Here.
And Commissioner Campbell. Okay, so this meeting is being held pursuant to Executive Order 16 as amended and extended by Executive Order 71 in connection with the continuing state of emergency caused by COVID-19. This meeting is being held to conduct essential business of the HR Committee of the Board of Commissioners of Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency. The public has been invited to attend. The meeting will be recorded and made available for public viewing on YouTube. Official business may commence upon a motion, second, and roll call vote in favor of said motion to proceed with this meeting electronically.
All right, thank you very much. So before we jump into the August 13, 2020 minute approval, I think I just want to say a couple things as the chair of the committee. First, I have been remiss in getting us together on a regular and consistent basis to kind of attend to the HR matters of the organization. And then I think from this point moving forward, we'll work more diligently, or I will be more diligent about getting us together no less than on a bi-monthly basis or as a weekly basis as is required to kind of sort of handle the issues of the HR committee. So I accept responsibility for being probably a little lax in kind of sort of leadership on that part, but I'll rectify that going forward. So with that, is there a motion to approve the August 13, 2020 minute?
Commissioner Ansari, if I may I recommend that we begin with a motion to proceed with this meeting electronically, and also note that. Sure.
I would move to proceed with the meeting electronically, as well stated.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, we got to do a roll call vote.
Roll call.
Commissioner Ansari?
Aye.
Commissioner Thaden?
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman? Commissioner Coleman, are you here? Commissioner Coleman, we do not have audio from you. Commissioner Bowers?
Aye.
Commissioner Batts?
Aye.
4 votes in favor to proceed electronically. Motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Commissioner Ansari?
Aye.
Commissioner Thaden?
Aye.
Commissioner Bowers?
Aye.
Commissioner Batts?
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman? Commissioner Coleman, we still cannot hear you, but that's 4 votes in favor to approve the minutes.
Okay, we got what time you're working on getting Paulette. You might have there. I just want to let you know that.
I'm sorry, Saul, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Just letting you know that we're working on getting Commissioner Coleman connected. So we can go ahead and proceed.
All right. So for today's meeting, there's nothing that we actually there's no motion up for a vote. I think what we have is we have 4 topics that are up for either information or discussion. So I think as we work through the issue 8 org chart, so I'll look to you as it relates to the org chart for the employee survey results. I'll look to Michael, our Chief Operating Officer, and HR team around items 5, 6, and 7. So with that, as we talk about the organizational chart, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so this is, I don't know why, is the reason why you have 2 copies of this?
Yes,
Yeah, it was 2 copies in the electronic version, but in the actual what was actually sent to us, there was only a single.
Okay,
There was only a single org chart in our board packet, and that was one of my questions: was why was there 2 org charts, and which one's the official one?
yeah, Pat, was this a mistake, or is there a reason why we have 2 of them?
Yeah. Yes, the first one that you see in the packet would be the most official one we had. There was question the board concerning the design and layout of the organizational chart. The second one is the one that we actually showed to you at the retreat back last month. So what we're looking for the committee to do is just to make it a little bit clearer, lay out the hierarchy among in the agency, so it make it a little bit clearer for the board to understand how the organizational chart is laid out. So the original one is on the first one that you see, and if the committee is satisfied with that, we make this the original organization chart for the agency going forward.
The one that Gus has up right now, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So,
All right, go ahead.
Saul, is this the organization chart that you see as sufficient and effective for the organization as it stands today?
There can be, I think it functions okay. We can do it. There are other options out there in terms of organizing, not the chart itself, but the work around the organization that we might want to think about, or the new ED might want to think about. So, but I think for now, this functions just fine. I think Gus kind of works in 2 roles. The operating units report to him, plus he kind of acts as more or less as chief of staff for me. But you know, there is some overlap in some of what we do, and there might be a different way of doing it. I haven't really vetted that with anybody on the staff yet, but I think there are other ways that we might want to talk about a more strategic way of organizing the work. We also might want to wait till there's a new ED, let him or her figure out how she thinks it should be better organized.
Mm-hmm. And so is there so what is the rhyme or reason to the way we're organized now? From a thought process perspective, why are we organized the way we see it? And I don't have an opinion. I'm just simply asking, why is this laid out like the way we are now?
So I think if you start with the bottom, on the bottom left, the urban development, rental assistance, community development, and affordable housing. Let's start with those 4. I think those are more or less our four, for lack of a better term, business units. And so each of those perform the basic work. You know, the urban development does the development side. You've got Norm doing the vouchers. You've got Emel sort of working as the agent of the city in our CDBG, et cetera, HUD funding. And then you've got our biggest group, of course, which is the affordable housing group, which has all of our rentals. So those are kind of our 4 big units and business units. And to a large extent, there's some overlap, but I can't say there's a great deal of overlap. But I do think it makes a lot of sense to have probably, you know, it makes some sense of keeping these 4 business units separate, though you might want to, in the future, you might want to think about some other ways of doing it. But for now, I think it works. And then on the far left, you kind of got our 2 basic staff functions that are non-finance. And so you've got IT, and you've got HR. Now, you know, that's what you got. On the right side, you've got everything related to construction. Okay, and so not on this chart, but also in that is purchasing, because so much of our purchasing or procurement is in the construction area, and we don't want to overlap and have more than one procurement department. We have decided to put procurement under, or in the past, procurement has reported to construction. Another area that could be organized differently if we felt it, but it's functioning okay right now. I think what happened was, in terms of the right-hand side of the bottom, where you have construction and recap separated, I think the reason for that initially was to make sure we were keeping our eye on envisioning process. And it was felt at some point in time that this was such an important project that we had to make sure that that recap had its own people, and recap basically is all the new construction that we're doing, in case we're not familiar with the lingo. So recap would be all the envisioning process, basically. Where construction, we would be working on matters unrelated to envisioning. And I think one of the moves was to put Buck on top of both of those, because there's overlap between recap and construction. And in order to get as much synergy possible, we have Buck, who has both of them reporting to him. So there is some overlap between recap and construction. You know, one might think, does it really make sense to keep them separate at this point in time? That's one area that might look at some exploring. Again, I have not really looked into at this point in time whether it should remain the same or whether it makes sense to change it. Might be very good reason to keep it separate. I'm just not aware. That's one area that kind of speaks out, because they do a lot of the same things. So that's kind of explains the organization. As you know, the organization is perfect, but I think this one, for the work that's being done today, functions okay. So that's kind of how it works. Now you have, I felt from, I think Harbison believed that he had so much on his plate, reporting to him. You know, he has the envisioning process through Buck. He has all of finance through Jim Filgen. He's got all the legal through Will Chopin. He's got communications. That it wasn't smart for him to have also the operating units report directly to him. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that there were some overlap between the four, I think he believed it made sense to have somebody between himself and the four business units, both because it decreases his span of control and would enable, in this case, Gus, to try to work on bringing the four business units together to the extent they needed to be. So I think that's the reason why he believed he needed a chief operating officer. And you know, to a large extent, it makes some sense. So in addition, all of the non-finance, other than purchasing, kind of non-finance back office functions also report up through. He also has security, which is of increasing importance. So that's kind of the thinking behind the org chart. I think general counsel should report to the ED. Mm-hmm. I think communication has to report to the ED. Obviously, you got man strategy. So that's the reason for this. Now, could you come up with other ways of doing it? Absolutely. And that might take more advantage of some of the synergy of the organization, possibly. So that's where I'm at with that.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from any of the commissioners or questions?
Yes, this is Paulette Coleman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
for the near term, is this the org chart that we're going to continue with? And
That would be my recommendation, that we don't really change anything until you have somebody coming in who has his or her vision of what he or she wants to do with the organization, and then create the structure that she might need.
does this organization chart in its current iteration lend itself to whatever we as a board have in mind for the vision for the agency?
I think so, yes. It's a good question, but I think so, yes. I don't think
I'm
it's a matter of
concerned because-
organization structure. It's a matter of implementing what the board wants to do. And this org structure could certainly do that.
Okay, I'm concerned because we haven't been as definitive or clear on our vision. And so I was wondering what people had in mind with this structure. I mean, it's what we have. And I guess for the next several months or until we get a new ED, what I'm hearing is that this is what we're going to keep in place until the new person comes.
That would be my recommendation. That would be my recommendation.
And Paulette, I think I agree. I think there probably are a few things I think that we can do to actually create a little more understanding of the organization in the way this is presented. But I would tend to not try to go and do a major reorg today, and we should have someone hired by July of August who may have a totally different vision. I think for now, if we're trying to just execute what we have on deck, I think 2 orgs within a year is probably less than desirable for the organization.
Okay, thank you.
This is Buck. If I could add one comment to what Saul explained before, just because I was part of the history. So what happened is when the Under One Roof program was about to start and started, there wasn't enough capacity between the COO, because prior the COO owned construction and recap. So there wasn't enough oversight capacity to handle greater than $100 million of construction a year to support the Under One Roof aggressive program of $35 million from the city, $10 to $15 million from MDHA to expand and do construction and oversee all the properties along with affordable housing director. So this org chart gives us the ability to expand, whereas before, without a chief development officer position, the staff was at complete capacity for doing anything. So let's just say if we were to get Amazon money or we get more money from the city, this organization can absorb that work. Prior to that, we couldn't have absorbed that work because the COO, there was 2 positions, COO and CFO, and there just wasn't enough ability to handle all that. We didn't have a strategic intergovernment affairs officer that was being handled through community development, and so these 2 positions give us the capacity to grow going forward. So that's why we transitioned to a few more positions over the past 18 to 24 months.
Thanks, Buck. And I think, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have another question. After the executive office, those six positions, how many of them are former military?
I would say, is Jim Filgen a veteran?
Let's say 2.
Then it's 2. Buck and Gus.
And on the next tier, the next 2 tiers?
The next 2 tiers, I would venture to say none, but I could be wrong.
Who knows? Is Pat not there, and does she know?
Good morning, Commissioner Coleman. our retired military would be Gus and Buck, and we do not have any directors that are retired military.
I'm sorry, you said Buck and what now?
Buck and Gus.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think you, Paulette, do you have any more questions?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you for your input. Kay, did you have any questions?
Nope.
Emily?
No, I would just say I agree. I think we should stick with this chart. Stick with it moving forward till we get a new executive director in place, and then let them study and look and analyze and work with staff. And then if they want to make any changes, then they can come to us at that time. So I'm fine with this chart as it is.
Agreed.
Thank you. So Saul, here's the two things I would ask you to add to this chart. I think what in an interim role, I think it's appropriate that we begin to start our view of succession planning on this chart. And so I think that it would be very reasonable that between now and the time we have identified a new executive director, is that we're making some assessment, is that as people grow inside the organizations, what are their paths to growth, and where is the talent inside the organization, and how is it being developed for future roles? And I'm not suggesting that, at least at this very early moment, that this is a public, statement, but I do think we should have some view of here's who's ready now. That if Michael Herter were to leave our current COO was to leave the organization, who's ready now? Who's 1 to 3 year time frame? It just lay those things out in some organizational way, so we're beginning to identify talent in real time. And I'd like for that to be something that at the HR committee that we talk about at least on a quarterly basis, that we kind of sort of review our view on succession planning. And I think the next step, and I think just for now, is simply let's just lay it out. And if we believe we have gaps in the organization for immediate, let's just say there are gaps. It's just really just a situational snapshot of the capabilities of our people inside of the organization. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not an evaluation of who's doing well now or not doing well now, or who needs improvement. It's just simply saying, if Norman Deep were to leave tomorrow, who is the person that we would put into Norman's role, or who do we need to be identifying who we may need to train to do something like Norman's role? And I think the second thing that would be good for me to see is that at the COO, Chief Development and Executive Director, if we just simply have in parentheses how many employees actually report through each one of those functions, just at the top level, or just at the chief operating communications, general counsel, strategy, chief development officers, just the number of people who actually report to them. That's just simple statement of fact.
You mean direct and indirect, right?
Yes, so under chief operating officer, human resources, affordable housing, they all report through the COO. How many people are under the COO's direction in that organization?
Okay, gotcha.
Or in that function?
I think those are both really good suggestions.
I want to raise just a little bit of concern around succession planning. So Aioli, I think I'm comfortable with our interim executive director reporting out on basically where do we feel confident that we have one or multiple people lined at that could take on that role if we have changes. But what I don't really want to do in a public forum is identify people by name. I think that is something that could set up expectations where I don't want to necessarily, right? And so I think that it's really just more of a general report and understanding, for instance, while I don't know the answer to this, but for instance, if Will Chopin as our general counsel doesn't necessarily have a successor, that might just understanding what are the places where we would anticipate we're bringing someone in from the outside, because it doesn't make sense to be doing succession planning versus places where, we should be doing it and identify any gaps. So I think that approach would make me more comfortable.
I think
Let me suggest this, if it's okay,
it's fine.
Commissioner Ansari, that we hear this need to do some succession planning. I don't even know where we are with it. And so why don't you let me and the staff take a look at what we have and get a process started, and then we can talk about the best way to do that process, given that everything's out in the open and what we do. So why don't we take that on and make some recommendations on that?
Oh, I agree with Commissioner Thaden's comment, and I think I'd be totally comfortable if there is still in those same categories, ready now, 1 to 3. If the answer for the next turn is simply yes or no,
Okay.
or if it's yes in one person, or no, or yes in in parentheses, I think that's perfectly fine for where we are. So I think that's a great that's a good point, Commissioner Thaden.
All right. Got it.
So, are there any more questions, discussion related to our org chart? And so, I'm sorry. Any more questions or discussion?
Question. This is Commissioner Batts.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, you can. Yes, I'm glad you brought that out about people that's next in line. Like, we all know that Bo Biggs is leaving. So has his job been posted? Will an intern take his position? How does that work?
Whose job? I couldn't hear. I'm sorry.
Oh, Will Biggs.
The director of affordable housing.
So we're going to be doing Pat, do you want to talk about that?
We're working on doing an in-house recruitment for the director of affordable housing. It will be a national search for a director. The position has not been posted yet. We're currently working on creating the flyer for the poster. For the posting, it should go out as early part of next week.
Okay, thank you.
And Julia Moss is serving as the interim affordable housing director.
Got it. So, Gus, on the director of affordable housing role, I'm happy to hear that we're both looking internally and externally. But before you make that job post, I like to see what that job posting actually looks like. And I say that because we are right now, until someone changes the direction, we're moving to a mixed income approach to our overall portfolio. And so if we have a job description that's very HUD and affordable housing focused without a view for the future, I think that we probably we probably lower our chances for identifying a broad range of candidates with a skill set that we need to import into the organization. So before we let that launch on Friday, can we just make some time to kind of sit down with me and whomever else would like who's interested in that, and just really kind of identify what does that job description look like, and what do we actually think we're looking for relative to where the organization is going in the next 3 to 5 to 7 years.
Ellie, can I actually add a question there? And this is a question for Gus and Saul. Is it a possibility to leave this in an interim position with Julia leading it until we bring on a new executive director? I'm just interested in hearing your thought processes for hiring permanently at this time.
That's a great question, Emily.
I didn't get the question. I'm sorry.
Paulette, I'm asking if it's possible to leave this position in an interim state where Julia Moss is acting as interim director of affordable housing, or what was the rationale from Gus and Saul related to hiring permanently before we have a new ED on board?
Thank you.
It's a good question. I guess from my perspective, I'm concerned about how long it's going to take us to get a regular full-time ED. This is one of the most, if not, it's one of the 5 most critical positions in the organization, and operating sort of a person short, and sort of with the interim for that long a period of time didn't really excite us. That was kind of the thinking. Rather than having a new ED come in and then she having to go out to the market for whatever, 6 months later. So now we're talking about a pretty long period of time. Now, what we could do, tee this up, get us where we, see how long this takes us to go, and maybe if the ED search is going in a way that we're comfortable with, maybe we do wait. But I don't know if I would recommend waiting until the ED comes in, just because it'll be a really long period of time to have that position vacant, as critical as it is. But I understand what you're asking. It's not a crazy question or anything, but that was the thinking.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one thing that I've had kicking around in my brain related to our affordable housing department is it is, obviously it's the largest management of departments on that level, and it's it was no small feat what they are accomplishing, and I think I've been wondering, is there the possibility of that needing to be separated into 2 separate divisions or departments? And Gus, that you probably have some insight into that. And I don't know if Julia's on the phone, but just interested to hear more.
No, I think I agree that with Saul that the portfolio is so large that to go 6 to 8 months without a director for that position may hurt us. Julia is fully capable of performing as the interim, but then the task that she was doing as the deputy now is going to be accomplished by somebody else. And so we're thinning the line, so to speak. Will Biggs is on, and if Will, I'm sure you have some thoughts as to the direction we potentially should go as an organization. I'd like to hear that from you.
Good morning. I am on, listening to the comments. I certainly agree that Julia Moss is quite capable of filling in the role. I certainly understand the concern of wanting the new ED to have some say in the selection. You have to weigh that with the need to handle the volume of work that's there. I hear your comment about separating the 2 portfolios. I think that would be difficult because you got mixed income in one, in the same development. So it would be very difficult to separate those responsibilities, I think. But I would probably err on the side of picking, going ahead and making the selection, I think, right now, if you can. It's going to be, challenge to find the right candidate that's got the good mix of, affordable housing, mixed income. You got to have the balance of knowing the affordable and the compliance regime, along with understanding the market and, what it takes to attract that client base. And so it's definitely a balancing act, I'll say.
I'm sorry, I have a couple of questions for Will. So Will, out of all the units, affordable housing units that MDHA has, what percentage are within the realm of the Envision initiative compared to all the others scattered around this county?
So the Envision properties are primarily our newer properties. And so it's primarily relegated to the activity that's happening on the hospital campus. And so you're talking about 400 units roughly that are part of that Envision process. The total portfolio we've got is closer to 6,400 with all of the units that we've got. So it's I mean, therefore the envision portion of it is growing faster than the non-envision portion. But right now, the dominant, portion of the units is going to be the, mostly subsidized.
Yeah, and I guess that's my view is this, in the near future, the majority of the units are under the traditional program. We know we need the mindset and the thinking to think about all the dynamics of mixed income initiatives. We know that, we all know that, but pressing needs are, we have these thousands of units that we need someone to be on top of, and that are the other units set aside from the Envision initiative units, even in the near future. So my view is, I agree with Will. I think we need to hire sooner as opposed to later. A great scenario would be to be able to have someone come in that has knowledge and maybe some experience around, mixing income initiatives. But we got some pressing matters in the near term that I feel like we need to stay on top of. Thank you.
I also feel comfortable with the approach, and I appreciate the additional information. And sorry, Will, I didn't realize you were on the call.
Perfect. So I think where we are, I think as a due-out, as a follow-up to this conversation is Gus, I'd like to just make sure, and I think we should just make this available to Commissioner Thader and Bowers and other members of the commission, just to kind of understand where that is. I think what you hear from us is that we agree with the organization's approach to go ahead and pursue replacing this role on a shorter, in the near term, rather than the long term. And so I had on my list of questions, most of them have been answers, that how long we think this process might take. Is we thinking this is 30, 60, 90, 120 day process? What are your thoughts, Gus?
Actually, I would defer to Pat because she's got the experience in this one. Pat, your thoughts on how long it would take?
The plan would be, it would be a 60 day. The posting would be up for 30 days, and we'd take 30 more days to interview and make the selection.
Okay.
Commissioner, sorry, we'll get you the PD as well as the flyer prior to release. Got
it. Thanks. And if you could send that to the entire board of commissioners, that'd be great.
Let's let Matt actually. Let's keep everything funneled through Matt. It's just easier, Gus.
All right. So we got 20 minutes left, and we've got 3 topics. I think I like to give topic number 5 its due time today. So I'm gonna jump out on 6 and 7 and say we move that to our next meeting, and I'll figure out when we can get a next meeting. But just real quick, based on 6 and 7, I had a conversation earlier with Matt on 6, and I don't think this requires any response from the agency. I think on number 6, we weren't provided a copy of the personnel policy, and I would suspect that our personnel policy is multiple pages front and back, and that the goal would not be for the commissioners to read the personnel policy. But I think what would be good before we get to this conversation, Gus, is that we simply get what are the key topic heading, subject matter, whatever those things are, in just a simple outline format that we just get in front of us, so we know what's in the personnel policy by high level heading. And it should be no more than a single page. And I think getting that out in advance of a meeting, and then you being prepared to say, here's the problem we think we're trying to solve, and this is why we're bringing this to you. Here's our evidence of the problem, and here's what we have laid out as a process, and we'd like to get your feedback on, one, do you agree with the problem and our process? I think that would be an effective way to do that. And I think because we don't have any of that for today, I don't want to go to let's just talk out loud about the personnel policy today.
I think we might look at also, just as kind of not on topic so much, we probably just put on the website, the personnel policy. I mean, obviously it's a public document, and then, I don't know, it's just an idea. So I don't know who wants to, Gus, why don't you take that one on?
Okay, thanks. Good recommendation, Saul. And I think the same general comments around administrative pay plan review. I mean, I think the first question I'm asking is, what problem are we trying to solve by having this conversation with the HR committee? And what's the evidence that it's, that we need to be having that discussion at this level? And if there's a problem and there's strong evidence, what process is the agency recommending to move forward with this? And so, in my mind, this is very much connected to the employee engagement survey results. And so, if I want to make sure that as we look at the things that are valuable to our employees, is that they're reflective of what the survey says. And so I think once we jump into that and we get some high level summaries of what we thought we heard from the employee engagement survey, I think there's a direct link between what we heard from our employees and what's popping up in number 7. So I like to try to take it in that order if we could.
Acknowledge all.
Any thoughts from any other from any of the other commissioners?
No, makes sense to me.
Okay.
I like that approach, and I have just one other, just curiosity. How does our executive or whatever organizational chart compare to other similarly situated authorities? I know they're not exactly the same now since we've gone to RAD, but what do our peer cities or peer authorities look like? And if somebody could provide that information at our next meeting, I would be very appreciative.
We will look into that. Thank you.
Got it. And so let's do that, and we should move the item 6 and 7 to the next meeting, and let's go ahead and jump into number 5. And I think, Saul, from at least as it relates to the Human Resources Committee, I think we should take the approach that all the committee members have read the information that was presented in advance of the meeting, and that we don't start off with a recap of everything we said. I think we should jump into, we assume you've read it, here's the meat. And if we can take that approach today to help us be a little more productive in today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. So my understanding is this is actually the first time we've done this, okay, at least into anybody's memory. So unfortunately, we have nothing really to compare this to. That's the first point of interest that the committee might be interested in. Secondly, I think the results speak for themselves. I think that they are okay. We obviously want to see some improvement under the scales that we put forth. We're sort of just into the good category and the low end of good. And as far as I'm concerned, that's, no pun intended, that's just not good enough. So what I asked Gus and Pat to do was to send results of the survey out to each of the directors, have a series of meetings with the directors, and develop a set of countermeasures to what some of the more major issues were. And I think some of the major issues were really favoritism, communication, and lack of understanding what the vision of the organization was. And so based on that, I think we also supplied to you what our recommendations are. I'm going to kind of hold the directors' feet to the fire, and I'm going to have quarterly meetings with the directors as a follow-up to make sure that we're doing what we promised to do. We can certainly do a lot on the communication side. On the pay side, I don't think anybody believes they get paid enough money. That being said, we haven't, that's what troubles me the least, really. That being said, as Pat pointed out at the retreat, we haven't really done a complete revision of the pay plan in 20 years. So I think to do that makes some sense, and will at least give us We did some of it, as people point out in some of the materials. You know, we felt we did go out to the market on some of our positions, but really need to take a look at our pay plan in general. And Pat's gonna discuss this with both Metro and the other similar agencies as ours in the city to see what their pay plans look like. So I think those are as you said, we've got like a 6 or 7 part plan to improve our communication and improve our training. The one thing that really concerned me the most is this whole issue of, I don't know how prevalent it is. And you read these comments, you don't know how much it reflects everybody's perspective. But I am concerned about sort of the comments about silos. And if I would have answered this question a lot differently if we're just talking about my team, right? Those kind of comments where people believe that their team is functioning fine, but as soon as they try to get information or work with another team, they don't get the response that they feel like they deserve. And so I want to really understand what that's all about, because you shouldn't be teaching your sisters, you shouldn't be treating your sisters and brothers that way. And so I want to really get a better understanding of what that's all about. I'm going to meet with the directors about that and try to figure out a way we can do something about that. And I think some of the training on communication and leadership will really help there. So that's kind of where it's at. And if there are other suggestions that any of you people who have been working in large organizations before have that you think we can add to our toolkit, we're all ears. And we don't need the answer today, but if you want to think about what you've been through in your organization, what you've done that you thought worked to help enhance communication and sense of belonging, that would be great. So.
Thanks, all. Any comments or questions from any commissioners?
I just wasn't sure when we're looking at the pay plan that we're looking at it more comprehensively around compensation. Because, when we're talking about the question of thinking about equity and economic equity amongst staff, there is this challenge. It's a wonderful thing that we are offering such a large retirement, package. But I know that our lower income employees are really not taking advantage of that. And so I just want us to make sure that we're taking a look at that, Pat, relative to how others are structuring throughout the local governments.
Good point.
Commissioner Bowers?
Yes, I get automatically muted and then I start talking and I realize I've been muted.
That's me. I mute you all the time. So
Thanks, all. Now I know how you really feel. 2 things. So do you have a timeline of this process where you're going to be working with the directors for them to identify changes that they believe that can be made to raise the performance in the areas where we're not as strong as we want to be?
Yeah.
Do you have a timeline laid out for that?
Well, so beginning in March on the communications piece, we're already going to start that. We've already asked the directors to implement. So hopefully by March, we're going to have most of the implementation done on the communication piece. On the pay piece, Pat, what do you think? How long do you think it's going to take you to do all that? That's a big job.
That's a big job. I anticipate we need to put a plan together. The question being is that how far do we want to get out information? Do we just want to look at peer organizations such as the local government or other housing authorities so that we can put comparison in place? So hopefully within the next 3 to 4 months, or maybe stretch out to 6 months, we should have enough information that we can make a decision, I believe.
Okay.
One of the questions we'll need to address is whether or not we want to bring in a third party to help do that. So Pat and I and Gus, and we'll get together and think that over and make a recommendation to you on that.
Okay.
And then on the training, Pat's already identified some training modules, and she is going to begin in May of this year to begin training. We did a very comprehensive, it's not really related to anything that came from the survey, we did a very comprehensive sexual harassment training last fall, which was, I think it was a full day, and was a very, very solid training. But I think we need help on communication and leadership. I think those are two things that we can really use help. And my view is that nobody told you had to be a manager, right? For whatever reason, you raised your hand, whether it was the glory or the money or whatever it was. But with that comes a set of responsibilities that aren't a lot of fun. And so, and I think, we tend to promote people who are good at their current job into leadership roles without giving them necessary training to succeed. And I'm very big on, some people get it intuitively, but even if you don't get it intuitively, you can get better if you know what questions and what to look out for. And so managing one-on-one is essential for everybody to go through this organization. And I really, and Pat's in the process of identifying the best module for that. That to me is the most important thing we can do going forward. So.
And then,
And so I'd also make a comment. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make this point because I've seen this in the public sector when I was with my former organization. One of the programs that my organization ran was a volunteer income tax assistance program. And so you looked at what people were bringing in, and you looked at Metro employees. In this case, these were lower paid Metro employees, and some were teachers. And their benefit package in terms of investment options, it was terrible. It was terrible, terrible. And they didn't have an understanding of it. So particularly for our folks who may be at the lower income scales, it's critical to get that right and to know that it's the best that it can be for them, and then to help them understand it and the value of it. Because I saw this across Metro employees that were coming to us and doing their taxes. It was just astounding.
Yeah, Pat pays a lot of attention to that. It's a constant struggle, in terms of trying to get employees to do the right thing with their retirement money. But we talk about this, and it's something I know that we are aware of and take seriously. And you can only do more. I agree. And so, we're taking a look at what we're doing, but it is something that's been on our radar. So.
And Saul, who makes a decision internally about the choice of what's going to be offered in terms of retirement benefits around investment options? What person makes that decision about what company to go with or work with, and how's that done?
So ultimately, I think
actually,
Jim Thogen is the finance committee.
No, actually, we do as the board of commissioners. Actually,
the whole board. We actually, that's true. Sorry,
that's right. Ultimately, we have been presented at least every year since I've been here. Here is the retirement program that's run through Vanguard, and they show up every year and they say, here's what we're offering your employees, and here's the choices that they have, and here's their relative contribution or their ability to take advantage of the options that are available to them. And I think it's very specific to Emily's point around equity. But ultimately, it starts with the board of commissioners because we approve.
That's right, I remember. Thank you.
Yep, we approve the plan.
Okay, and currently it's through Vanguard. Got it.
Mm-hmm. But we have a large swath of people who sit in that, fixed income, right? And we're trying to get them to understand that might not be the best place to be. And Pat struggles with that on a continuous basis.
Yeah, it's the human factor.
Right.
So we're running off into 4 minutes left. I think this topic actually deserves more discussion around it and to get into it. I think Saul, my two big questions is that when is the next follow up, right? Because I think you make a fair point that there is no frame of reference to compare this against. What is
6
our
months.
plan? Okay, great. So I think
But we're
I
going to
think
do
that-
this every 6 months. And I would just want to make one comment real quick, Commissioner, and sorry, just so our two lowest scores were in leadership and communication. And when you put the pandemic and the lessons learned that we've learned throughout this pandemic, it's not surprising to me to see that. And so this is some of the adjustments we need to make from a leadership team all the way down, and how we lead and manage. As Saul was mentioned, Manage 101 is not the same as it was in 2019. It's different today, and we've got to make changes to be able to adapt to that. But we'll do this every 6 months so that we get this is our first benchmark, and we'll be able to see where we're at in 6 months and then make course corrections as we go.
Perfect. And so I think that was kind of got right to my first point, is that we talk a lot about pay and compensation when the reality is that leadership, which is the people who our employees rely upon to take direction from, receive feedback, protect themselves, be safe, grow in their career, is the lowest rated thing in our employee engagement survey. So if that is not at the forefront of what we're doing, I think we'll be challenged long term. And so Saul and Pat and Gus, can I ask you guys to do a couple things? So as I read through the specific feedback and through the actual detailed comments from the employee engagement survey, I didn't get the sense from our employees that, well, I take that back. I'd like to be able to determine, even in an anonymized scale, is kind of sort of where these things come from. Because when you read the specific comments around compensation, lots of it has to do with COVID and safety related issues, that I am being asked to go into unsafe places, whether they be for fear of COVID or because they're hostile tenants or hostile residents in our community. And I feel like I am in jeopardy, and therefore my compensation doesn't match the jeopardy that there's a strain of that throughout these comments. Is there a way we can just try to spend some time really trying to tease this out, so that that we're actually driving very specific solutions, if that's where it actually ends up? I think it might be worth someone trying to pull that stuff out and bringing that back to the Board of Commissioners to our next meeting around that, specific to those comments. But I think that the fact that leadership is our lowest rated category, followed by COVID-19 response and communication and inclusion, it feels like we shouldn't get distracted on what's easy to talk about or fulfilling to talk about, and really work on the people who are on this call and on that org chart, and how we can be better at helping our employees be engaged in the organization. All right. So with that, is there any more old business?
Aoli, I did just want to point out that we have an additional 30 minutes for this meeting. Not to say that we need to take it, but I just wanted to point out that that was what was booked, and I think that was what the public notice was for. Saul, am I right about that?
Oh, I stand corrected. You were right, Emily. Sorry about that. For some reason, my calendar only had it for an hour.
Yeah, totally fine. If there was additional comments, or if we wanted to dig in on anything else, I think there's time.
No, I was booked for an hour and a half too, Aoli, so if we want to dig into one of these others,
Well, let's do that.
I have time for that.
Let's do that then. So Saul, so when I look at the employee satisfaction survey recommendations,
Yeah.
the third page out here, and again, you guys can take me anywhere different for any of the members of the committee. Can I ask you to begin to kind of sort of So we've got these categories on our survey scoring summary. Can we be more specific in matching what these recommendations are to what's actually in the categories around that, so we can actually make a little more connection between the scores and kind of sort of our activities or our categories and activities?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think on the first one, it's really leadership and community. Well, it's really leadership. First one. The second one, I think, addressed inclusion and communication. And then the next ones are pretty much all communications. And then, and leadership, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth one is the rewards and opportunities. And the last one is inclusion.
Mm-hmm. And so what about COVID-19 response?
Yeah, that's a good one. Good question. Gus, you're gonna bail me out here. Is there anything we're doing on the COVID front that in the immediate future, or Pat?
I mean, what we have is our continuity of operations with COVID that has been released at the beginning of, I guess it was in January. It was released in January. So that has provided the guidance for the team and really to empower the directors to do what they need to do to support their teams, their employees for COVID-19. I don't know if you've seen a copy of that, but we can definitely get you a copy. But that's an all-inclusive plan for the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we're hoping that with the implementation of that, it's cleared up a lot of the, we struggled with this last year, as everybody did. And as Gus pointed out and Pat's pointed out, we kind of learned as it went on. And we had situations where somebody wasn't showing symptoms, yet kept testing positive, and we were not allowing them to come back to work because that was the guidance at the time. And then that guidance changed, and then other departments are doing X, other departments are doing Y. And so we had a thorough, I had forgotten about this, thanks Gus, but we had all the directors weighed in on the new policy. We developed a new policy. Hopefully it'll be more consistent, and the managers will understand what they can and can't do. But a lot of this is just difficult because you have the office people and the non-office people, and it's really up to the individual manager, to talk to their employees about, that's right, it's not a perfect world, and some people have to come in and some people don't. But on the other hand, you're working a reduced schedule, so you just have to try to address those issues, but they're difficult. So
may I chime in, please?
Yeah.
In the comments from the employees, you'll notice there's quite a few comments about the lack of hazard pay. And I think some of the low scores for COVID is reflective of the fact that employees did not receive hazard pay. And also a lot of the maintenance staff felt that there was some disparity because they did come into work and work on site, whereas others teleworked. So there was somewhat disagreement among that. So I think the scores are reflective of some of that dissatisfaction with hazard pay, and then also some working telework and some working on site.
Right. That was pretty clear through the comments. But I think what really jumped out to me, if I've circled comment number in our direct survey, number 1, number 5, number 6, number 10, number 11, number 20, number 21, number 38, right? When I look at those things, and many of those things talk about what are the risks of my job. There's a few comments on hazard pay, but some of it seems to come from the fact is that I don't feel like the organization simply understands the risk you're being asked to take. And there's clear and transparent protocol around how we do these things. And so, Gus, I'm going to push back a little harder on this and saying, well, we have a plan and we've rolled it out and we sent the email to everyone. I really like for us to be able to see something that's something that's very easy to understand in a check light, in a dashboard in a very simple format that clearly says these are the ways, not a policy, right? Because these people aren't responding to policy in their comments. They're responding is, do these people actually understand how I feel when I walk into a house where somebody might have COVID? That's what I read in the comments, right? And so is there some way that we can prepare or present to our employees is that, hey, if you're doing this, here are like the 5 things, I don't know, I'm just thinking OSHA stuff and, from my background in construction, like, here are the 5 things around here. And if you see any of these 5 things present, do this, right? Because part of it is actually you have to be able to push back on people and say, we heard you, here's what we've very done specifically, and they're never going to read 30 pages of anything. But we can actually become it can be a mutual conversation. And what we're doing is actually transparent. So when people complain, you say, well, look at what we're doing now. If this is not enough, what do you suggest? I feel like we need to create more of that dynamic inside the organization, as opposed to saying we have a policy and we pushed out the COVID work protocol policy and it should solve it all.
No, completely agree. In fact, I will ask Will Biggs and Norman Deep talk about what they've done with their teams. And specifically, Norman had training with his inspectors at the end of January to discuss how they're going to get back to doing inspections safely. And Will Biggs implemented some protocols for his maintenance teams to ask those specific questions of the residents prior to entering. Will, if you could talk a little bit about what you've done with your team.
So Gus, can I ask that
Okay.
we not go there on this? Because the goal is not to convince the Board of Commissioners that this is effective. The goal is to
Understood.
convince our employees that what we have in place is effective. And so if we are actually doing these things, I think what we would like to see as part of the HR committee and the work that we're doing is we actually like to see the results of the plans that are actually being put in place, not like, because we're not walking into the apartments. So if we can kind of sort of identify around COVID-19 is that here are the things, like, very clearly, if there was a bullet number 6, here are the 6 things that we are doing on a go forward basis that we think will improve our results related to this. I think that would be a good place to start, because we're not accusing anybody of doing anything wrong or any malfeasance or saying you haven't done a job. No one could have prepared for COVID. We could have done any of that stuff. Now we're saying we do know that COVID has a huge impact on the way our employees perceive the organization. Based on what we've learned in the last year, here are the things that we are doing for our employees that we believe that address or ameliorate their concerns to the extent possible. We just like to see it on a piece of paper.
Will do.
Commissioner Coleman, this is something that's been heavy hot on your mind, especially, and Commissioner Bowers, especially as it relates to some of the things that are going on. Are there any comments related to COVID?
No, I think what I'm hearing, and I agree with this, is based on this feedback from employees and what they are saying, what they have said pretty clearly, even though the agency has in place these protocols, processes, whatever, the employees are still reporting these concerns. So based on that, then the next step is for the department, and I guess this comes under Will's department, will take those and then come up with ways to lessen those concerns and work with employees around those to improve that, because we know the agency had these things in place, and we know the craziness of the CDC guidelines. It was this one day, this another day. It was just a challenge, but they're reporting these concerns on this survey. So the issue is not what the agency has in place today, It's how it's going to address and what it's going to try to do to address those concerns and lessen the anxiety felt by these employees. Am I right on that?
Yeah, just one small point of reference, and this is not defensive. Just so everybody understands, survey was done in November, and since we've done a lot in this area, is what I think Gus's point was. And so we can do more. We're going to do more, and we're going to get you what you need. But that's just a point of reference.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
This is Paulette Coleman, and I wasn't unmuted, and I put a lot of stuff in the chat. From my recollection, these issues transcend COVID. They were beyond COVID-19. There were issues around communications that have been of concern since I've been on the commission. And it's not clear to me who in leadership is charged with monitoring and attending to the overall well-being of all employees. I was struck by the thoughtfulness of the comments and the length of the responses. Because when you get employee surveys like that, I mean, people, even if the question isn't a yes or no, that's what they put. So these people are concerned and they took the time to express it. I also believe that these problems are deeper than an email notice and policies. It's really about how humans interact with other humans, how humans who are in leadership affirm other people, how humans who are in leadership also treat other people. I was very disturbed, and it could have been just a one-off or an outlier, but I think I read it more than once about perceptions of favoritism, about perceptions of not following whatever the policies are, perceptions of unfair perhaps and unequal treatment. And again, these could have been outliers, but they got presented. And like I said, in the context of responses that were so thorough and lengthy compared to most surveys, I believe they bear attention. And I guess my ultimate question is, does leadership get it?
Yes.
And so then the question begins, how is behavior of the leaders going to change to make the employees at all levels feel that they do get it?
Well, I think we're going to start attacking it according to the plan outlined by Pat and Gus under the direction with consultation with the directors, and that's where we're going to start. We need training. We need both leadership and management training. We need to improve our communications, and so on dignity and respect, which is what you're getting towards. Those are things that we're going to have to just keep hammering and make sure people understand how we expect people to treat each other in the organization. So, you know, and we'll know in 6 months whether we've made any dent or not. So yeah. I think we do take it serious.
I guess the other piece of it is, what if, and I hope this isn't the case, the reality exists that there are some people, for whatever reasons, who can't or won't get on board. Then what happens?
Well, that would be unfortunate. That would be unfortunate, and we'd have to handle it in the way we handle all issues relating to employees.
So what question oh, sorry, go ahead, Paulette.
One of the things that struck me in reading the responses is some of them kind of drill down really deeply to like maybe a particular property and a manager. You know, it was just really weird. So there's a high level of policy, there's a high level of commitment, but then does it drill down to the lowest levels? Mm-hmm. And, you know, there have to be systems in place, or there has to be a process to make sure that happens. And the only thing that comes to mind is this horrible thing that Idi Amin used to do, and he's certainly not a model for anything, but he would just show up anywhere, anytime. And I'm not saying that's what we need to do, but that helps people to get on board when they know that they're going to be held accountable and there's going to be some kind of monitoring, hopefully that isn't oppressive.
listen, I think it's management 101. I know that sounds like I'm poo-pooing it, or it's just, we have to do a better job managing. And we have to give people we have to invest in our human resources. I think all organizations suffer from that. We're not the only ones. I think investment in human resources is something that organizations have a difficult time doing because there's no immediate return on investment. That being said, we're not happy with these results, and we're going to invest in our human resources. And so that's all there is to it.
Yep.
I feel very strongly about that.
So I appreciate that, and I agree with you that management training really is something that's needed here. But I think my question is, what are we doing in terms of accountability related to evaluation? So do we incorporate bottom-up input to managers and directors and leadership during our evaluation process? Is that formalized?
Pat, I don't know, but it's a good question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think specifically to that, one of my notes is that should we look at putting into a 360 review, right, at kind of sort of at a certain level within the organization. All right, it's effectively impossible to do for every employee of the organization, but there are certainly components of a 360 review that I think could be implemented inside of our organization. I think that's something we should take a look at, because a lot of the comments that came in that were positive were really around, thank you for allowing us to provide input. And if the people who are providing leadership in the organization don't have any accountability to the people that actually serve our residents, right, that we may need to look at that inside the HR policies as a way to kind of sort of create greater connectivity.
Why don't we prepare for the next meeting, what our evaluation process covers, to the extent to which we're doing it. I'm not even sure of that. And ways we can improve if we need to on making sure we get proper feedback during the evaluation process.
That's right. And so I think the other 2 points that really jump out to me is around transparency and presence, right? That when I think of some of Commissioner Colvin's comments and read the comments and listen to Commissioner Thaden and Bowers, I think there's this component of transparency. So when I look at bullet number 2, human resources will continue to provide diversity, inclusion, and respectful workplace training, right? It feels like that being transparent around these things actually just matter, even if the results aren't good, because we all know every organization isn't perfect and no one's looking at any individual and saying this, but just being transparent with the information and saying, hey, here's where we are today. Here's where we would like to be in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And we'll check in with you at 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. I mean, I think those type of things actually just matter and let people feel like at least we think they know the issues and they've cleared them up. And it's not just, we just talked about it in our previous meeting. I think that could go a long way towards improving the communication and simply more transparency. The second point, and it was to the Idi Amin point, but I don't know if I would use that leadership reference, is in the military, right? There's a strong component of it. You just got to be there, right? You just can't be the division officer or the department head from your stateroom issuing orders. You actually just sometimes you just need to be in the engine room, right? When the engine needs to be fixed, because the guys will work 24 hours to fix the engine. I just want to see you there. And so a lot of these feedbacks around safety and COVID and stuff, they're saying, hey, you guys are sitting in an office telling people what they got to do. I've never seen you one time show up and be shoulder to shoulder with us. And I think if we as a leadership team were doing more of that and actually taking the picture while you're there with people while they're responding and posting and says, this is how we are actually working together, shoulder and shoulder, side by side, I think all those things will make great strides in a very personal way than what we're seeing reflected in our comments.
Great comment.
Comment, please. This is Commissioner Batts. Is it okay to speak?
Yes, yes.
As I look over the surveys and I hear people express their concern, it doesn't look like I disagree with just because COVID-19 started that the communication and the leadership skills have begun. No, it looks like to me, and I might be wrong, this is years and years and years of people doing the same thing, sitting in positions, leadership sitting in positions where the employees don't have a voice to say anything, or maybe afraid to say anything because
Hmm.
are they going to be untreated unfairly on their job? This is serious. The employees have spoken. It doesn't take, okay, we can have training all day for the leadership. What is accountability with the people in those positions at the desk? What are you going to do about on the survey? It says a manager sits all day and dictates, talks to her family, and she puts her job on the leasing assistant. What is that? You're getting paid to talk and sit and talk on the phone. That is insane. That cannot continue to happen. I think COVID-19, it made it a little worse, but this is years of stuff. The survey, never received a survey since I've been sitting on the board. This is insane. This has got to stop. No, we can't fix all of it, but the employees have spoken, and something has to be done. The morale is low. I mean, hey, you want to keep people? You make it where they can come to a job and feel safe and can open up and talk about it. Not only it's just the one thing, being bullied. Well, I have the pen in my hand. I'm at the desk. You say something I don't like, so I'm gonna make it uncomfortable for you on your job. This is years. I've been in housing. I've seen it. I've been in offices where people are talking loud. It has to
Hmm.
stop. This is years. It's not. This is just not started. Continue to put out surveys. If you're going to um, have directors um, every 6 months to come in and do how do you say they do a meeting about communication and leadership. Uh, okay, well let the employees speak. Has things changed? It's called accountability. It has to stop. This is crazy.
Yep.
People just come to work and get paid.
Look, so
People who's been sitting in positions for years and nothing has been done about it. No type of reprimand or say you know people are afraid. Employees are afraid to say, "Well, my manager is doing this." No,
mhm.
I guarantee you, if you had more surveys, it would be more than this. This is ridiculous. That's what I have to say.
So, so as the chair of the HR committee, I take those comments to heart. I take them seriously. Now, I will take a step back after 30 minutes of discussing this matter and saying there's still lots of good inside of what we do as an organization. And so, as I look at the highest responses to questions, right, our employers are saying they do enjoy the work that they do. They believe they have a strong work-life balance inside the organizations, and they believe that they're motivated, right, to give their best efforts to help MDHA succeed in its goal and its missions. And in the high category, that they do overall believe they're treated fairly and respectfully in the workplace. And so I think it's just as this committee and as a board of commissioners, I think we have to be mindful is that this is not an organization of doom and gloom. We think we do have some things that fundamentally we would like to correct. And I think around the human nature of leadership, I think around voice, as you said, Antoinette, and I think Paulette has discussed, used the word voice in the human aspect. I think we may not live up to our highest aspirations in some of those categories. And I think there are a few things that we can do, right? That's not about being punitive in nature as to how we treat our employees to achieve those things. I just think it's just really more of a time that organizations get busy. And what we fail to do is to take the time to step back to say, what are the really easy things we can do to combat this? Like a very easy thing we can do is I would say, hey, Gus, go give me the average tenure of MDHA employees and their turnover. I guarantee you it's actually quite low, right? It's probably actually quite low outside of everything but some maintenance level positions that are easy and transparent to translate to the marketplace. And we should see that information, right? And so if we have that and we go back and say, hey, we're reading the feedback and we're going to respond and we're going to do these things. But here's what the information is telling us. Based on how people move, they enjoy working for our organization. So I don't want us to cast ourselves on one side because I think there's lots of good information inside the organization that from a transparency process, if we just reflect back to our employees, they'll be like, there's some context to it. There are things to improve. We will, but I don't want us to lose sight is that for the main things that drive an organization, our employees seem incredibly well aligned, that are relatively well aligned to our mission and what we do. And I don't want to create the sense either at our executive level, at our directive level, or at any of the rank and file levels of the organization that we have some dastardly problem and that we're about to implode because we are not. So
we appreciate that.
Okay.
Yep. I just have an observation, and this in particular is for Gus and Saul. One of the values that we have with having Antoinette on us is that she has boots on the ground knowledge and experience and relationships with people in that particular arena. And I do see value in you all engaging Antoinette to get an understanding of what she knows that can help in this arena. I think that'd be very valuable. I think it's very important because she brings an understanding, that the rest of us don't have. And so we want to bring that in to help inform us, particularly, I guess, for Gus and Saul and whoever else is involved to inform to get a better outcome that you may not have been able to get the kind of outcome. This just adds so much value to it. So I would encourage you to do that because she brings tremendous value in that arena. Thank you.
Makes sense.
I agree, Kate. So for the purpose of just trying to stay online, I want to ask one final question and then try to get to closing out the agenda. So Saul, have this, what we're looking at today, has this been disseminated widely for all employees?
Not yet. That's going to be the topic of my first all-employee hands-on meeting. That's the plan.
Okay. All right. So I think we covered a lot of stuff, and I think we need to organize ourselves for the best meeting. And again, like I said earlier, that's all on me, and I will figure out how to jump on these topics in a more organized way for our next meeting. But I think I will leave saying I'm encouraged by the conversation we had today, and I now recognize how detrimental it's been for our organization for me. I continue to keep this happening on a regular basis and with a steady and consistent agenda. That's on me. I own it, and I will fix it from that perspective. So I just appreciate everybody participating today. I think on a go for it basis to be effective on this, guys, you should come in, Saul and Gus, and assuming that we've read the packet and we get into the work that needs to get done on these calls. So let me call for any old business. With there being none, any new business? With there being none, is there a motion to adjourn today's Human Resources Committee?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All
I
right.
just want to thank you all for your comments, your participation. This is near and dear to my heart personally. Thank you for taking the time out to help us through this. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks all.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.